Good morning to everybody participating in the hearing, and welcome Secretary Walsh. I look forward to your testimony on the Department of Labor's FY 2023 budget request. Last year when you testified before the subcommittee, a principal topic, and certainly a topic I raised, was how the COVID-19 pandemic had put an unprecedented strain on our economy and on our workforce. At the time, I had serious concerns that our country wouldn't return to our pre-pandemic unemployment levels, which had been the lowest since the late 1960s. And while I'm pleased that we're making real progress in lowering the unemployment rate, I'm concerned about the very real economic and labor shifts that have occurred since the last time we had a hearing and you were before this committee. I'm talking, of course, about the economic impact of inflation, an invisible tax that takes its toll on every American, but it's particularly burdensome for those who can least afford it. Many of the increases in paychecks have been more than offset by increases in what you have to pay for, and it only takes a trip to the gas station or the grocery store to know for most families exactly what that means. In recent months, that inflation numbers been above 8%, the highest rate in over 40 years. And the Treasury Secretary recently testified before the Senate Finance Committee that inflation was here to stay for any foreseeable future. This administration's inflation forecast has already showed prices rising this year at nearly twice the pre-pandemic rate. And while we might disagree on the root causes of this historic inflation, that's really reversing those economic gains made in the past, I do believe we can agree that every American is feeling the impact. History's told us that we can't spend our way out of inflation. Instead, we have to exercise fiscal responsibility and be prudent about determining what is truly needed to right the ship and begin to head things in a different direction. Additionally, we're seeing major labor shifts that I think will impact the labor market for years to come. Dubbed by some the Great Resignation, we've watched record numbers of employees resign following the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was particularly apparent and evident in the young adult population. Simultaneously, help wanted signs are still visible almost everywhere across the country as businesses and employers continue to search for workers to fill the vacancies they have. There's no question that this is a turbulent moment in our country's history, particularly our economic history, but often during the times like this of economic and market uncertainty, we have the opportunity to rethink the way we've been doing things and prioritize programs that provide the most benefit, in the case of the Department of Labor, to workers and employers alike. This is why I was surprised to see the FY 2023 budget doubling down on new programs and funding levels that were rejected just 3 months ago in the FY 2022 bill. The FY 23 proposed budget for the Department of Labor totals $14.9 billion, an increase of almost $2 billion and nearly 13% over the appropriations bill that we just passed. That's nearly triple the increase that was provided in that bill. Wouldn't expect to see that if I was you. And we want to be talking about what those priorities really are. Funding such as $100 million for the Power Plus initiative, which will transition workers away from jobs in the fossil fuel industry to what would be considered generally green jobs, is not included in the FY 22 final bill. And here it is, that $100 million is right back in this budget request. Similarly, Career Pathways for Youth Grants, a program that I began as chairman in 2020 to ensure that young adults in this country have adequate knowledge before they get there of all the post-secondary options that they need to know about to be informed about what their pathway really is. I agree with the chairman's view that there are a lot of ways to get to a successful career and a successful life that allows you to do the things that are best suited for the kind of life you want to lead. And we need to be sure that we're not just looking at one pathway. I think so much of education, secondary education, has been focused on only one way forward for a long time. And that's why we try to fund. I think the funding was about $15 million to look at career pathways early in the education process so that people in junior high school, middle school, and high school begin to get a sense of what kinds of jobs that are out there. I was surprised you didn't ask for the continuation of that program. Why is the funding for workers to transition out of their current stable career for jobs in industries that the administration prefers being prioritized, and looking at how the future labor force gets ready for the work that they would want to do isn't? We need to ensure that our labor programs are nimble and can adequately and appropriately address unexpected workforce challenges. For example, while I supported funding for registered apprenticeships, the registered apprenticeship model is underutilized by industries that need it the most, such as healthcare and IT and cybersecurity, because it's just not been a very flexible model. And I hope we can work with you to find more flexibility in that whole concept of apprenticeships. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We need to create an environment for Americans to thrive, and we need to target our federal resources to cultivating the workforce of the future. It's wrong for the federal government to dictate what that workforce should look like, and for bureaucrats in Washington to determine the speed in which we get there. That should be left up to states and communities and local economies. I believe we can work together to find consensus on the department's budget. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Secretary, as well as Chair Murray and our colleagues on the subcommittee to once again come up with a bill that prioritizes bipartisan initiatives and innovation in the workforce system. As the chair mentioned, this is my last likely hearing on the labor appropriations part of this budget, but we've had good success working together, finding ways to find a path forward. I certainly hope we can do that. I want to thank all my colleagues for their support over the time I've been on this committee, and particularly Chair Murray for the great working relationship we've had. Again, thank you for your time here today. Secretary Walsh, I look forward to working with you to strengthen our nation's workforce and create a more prosperous economy for all Americans. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.